The bench press bar didn't break that afternoon. The floor didn't break either. What broke was an idea. The idea that 400 pounds of muscle simply cannot be moved by 135 pounds of will, no matter how that will has been trained. Nobody at Ironclad Barbell Club had ever watched a 400-pound man hit the rubber flooring so fast, or so completely, or in such total silence. And nobody there had ever watched a man who put him down simply zip up a gym bag afterward, the way you'd finish an ordinary set of curls and move on to the next exercise. Santa Monica, California. Late July 1970. Ironclad Barbell Club sits 2 blocks off the Pacific Coast Highway in a converted machine shop warehouse, corrugated steel roof, single row of clouded skylights that turn the coastal afternoon into something thick and yellow. By 3 o'clock, the outside heat has worked its way through the metal roofing and settled over the floor like a second atmosphere. And the smell inside is a specific, permanent thing. Chalk dust, iron filings, rubber matting gone slightly sweet with age, and the sourness of 100 towels that never fully dry out this close to the ocean. Free weights clang against each other in a rhythm that never entirely stops, an unofficial metronome kept by the serious lifters who are always still there at 3 in the afternoon, long after the casual members have gone back to their offices. A radio behind the front counter plays something with too much static to identify. A ceiling fan turns without doing much. Along the back wall, a hand-painted mural of a Greek discus thrower has been fading for a decade, its colors bleached almost to memory by the same afternoon light now pouring through the skylights, watching over the room like an ancestor nobody quite remembers inviting. This is not a martial arts school. There is no mirror wall for forms, no wooden dummy in the corner, no rows of students bowing together before class. This is a temple built around a single, specific kind of worship, Mass, and its congregation measures devotion the way any congregation measures devotion, and what they are willing to sacrifice for it, which here means knees, backs, shoulders, and any afternoon plans that might interfere with the second training session. Joe Marsh is the gym's unofficial king, and everyone there, staff included, treats him accordingly. 26 years old, 6'4", 405 pounds at his last weigh-in, the bulk of it built across 9 relentless years of twice-daily training that began when he was a scrawny, overlooked 17-year-old getting shoved into hallway lockers, and ended with a frame that has never once been shoved by anyone since. His bench press stands at 620 pounds, a number the gym's owner had painted in gold letters on a small plaque bolted beside the squat rack 2 years earlier, the day Joe hit it in front of witnesses. His arms measure 24 inches around, cold, before the pump. He has placed second at 2 regional strongman exhibitions in Fresno and Bakersfield, has been photographed for a muscle magazine that never quite got him on the cover, and has, on 3 separate occasions that gym regulars still recount with relish, settled parking lot disagreements with nothing more than his silhouette stepping out of a car door. No punch thrown, no words needed beyond the sight of him unfolding to his full height. Grown men who have trained for a decade themselves defer to him without discussing why. Women glance and look away, uncertain whether the feeling is admiration or something closer to caution. Joe has never lost a physical confrontation in his adult life, mostly because nobody has ever been foolish enough or drunk enough to start one with him. Bruce Lee walks in a little after 3 o'clock, wearing plain dark trousers and a simple white t-shirt, carrying a canvas gym bag that looks almost too light for what it holds. He is 30 years old, 5'7" 135 pounds, 30 pounds lighter, by rough estimate, than the mass contained in Joe Marsh's right arm alone. He is not here to be seen. A friend on the studio lot, a stuntman who trains at Ironclad between shoots, told him the gym has the best pulley and cable system in West Los Angeles for a specific shoulder and forearm sequence Bruce has been refining for his own conditioning. Bruce has never heard the name Joe Marsh. He does not know the plaque by the squat rack exists. He wants 45 uninterrupted minutes with a cable machine before his 6 o'clock class in Chinatown, and nothing more complicated than that. He signs in at the front counter with the mild, unhurried courtesy of a man who has done this in 100 unfamiliar gyms before, finds an open cable station near the back wall, and begins a slow, deliberate warm-up, shoulders, wrists, the specific rotational stretches that most lifters in the building have never seen and would not recognize as preparation at all. A few heads turn briefly. Most don't. He is small, quiet, unremarkable in a room built to reward size, and the room treats him exactly the way rooms like that always treat something they don't understand yet, by ignoring it. He works through the first 2 exercises without incident, adjusting the pulley height twice, taking his time between sets in a way that would look, to anyone who didn't know better, almost lazy. It isn't. Every pause is deliberate, every breath measured, the stillness between repetitions doing as much work as the repetitions themselves. This is not a man performing strength for an audience. This is a man maintaining a machine he depends on, quietly, without ceremony, the way a watchmaker checks a movement nobody else in the room would think to look at twice. He is midway through a set of one-arm cable rows, moving with an economy of motion that draws attention from only the 2 or 3 lifters who happen to glance over and find themselves, without quite meaning to, watching a half-second longer than the movement seems to warrant. There is something in it, an efficiency, a total absence of wasted tension, that doesn't match anything else happening on the gym floor. Joe notices him during a rest period between sets of incline presses, toweling off, chalk dust still clinging to his forearms. He watches the row complete, watches the tight, coiled economy of it, and calls out, loud enough to carry across the whole free weight section. Hey, little man, that pulley's rated for real weight. Kiddie section's over by the mats if you want something your size. A ripple of laughter moves through the room. Not cruel. Exactly. Just the easy, reflexive laughter of a gym that has learned to laugh whenever Joe decides something is funny. Bruce finishes the repetition, sets the handle down with the same unhurried care he's shown all afternoon, and turns to face him. I'm using what I need, he says. There's no heat in it at all, no defensiveness, just a plain statement of fact. Joe grins wider, sensing an opening he doesn't often get to enjoy. Everybody in this gym knows real strength when they see it, and it isn't an 130-pound frame working a cable machine. You want to test that little body against somebody who's actually built? I'll go easy on you. Real easy. Bruce studies him for a moment, not with anger, but with the unhurried attention of a man reading a menu he's already decided he isn't going to order from. All right, he says quietly. Show me. Word moves through Ironclad Barbell Club the way it always moves through a gym on a slow afternoon. Fast, and then faster. Within 2 minutes, close to 40 people have drifted away from the squat racks, the free weight platforms, and the water fountain near the locker room, gathering loosely around the open mat space at the back wall, where the gym occasionally hosts amateur arm wrestling contests on Friday nights. 40 witnesses. One 405-pound man who has never in his adult life lost a physical confrontation. 135 pounds standing across from him with his hands loose at his sides, breathing exactly as calmly as he was 5 minutes earlier. Nobody in that gym. Not one of the 40. Not the front desk clerk craning over the counter. Not even Joe's 2 training partners standing closest to the mat. Believes for even a fraction of a second that this ends any way but one. The gym's owner, a wiry ex-wrestler named Hal Grierson, who has broken up more fights over the years than he can count, starts to step forward to shut the whole thing down, then stops himself halfway across the floor. He has seen Joe hurt people without meaning to. A sprained wrist here, a cracked rib there, always accidental, always the byproduct of a man who has never learned to calibrate his own force because he has never once needed to. But there is something about the way the stranger is standing, something Hal cannot quite name, that makes him hold his position at the edge of the crowd instead of intervening. Keep it clean, is all he says, to no one in particular, and thumbs his stopwatch out of old habit, though nobody has agreed there will be rounds to time. Joe doesn't wait for anyone to count down. He steps forward and throws a looping right hand. Not a trained punch, but 400 pounds of committed mass, swinging behind real intention. The same kind of blow that has ended parking lot disagreements before they had a chance to become anything else. Bruce is not there when it arrives. He has moved 8 inches to the left, no more than that, weight shifting through his hips rather than his feet, and the fist travels through the space his head occupied a half second earlier and finds nothing but warm gym air. A few people laugh, thinking it's a lucky dodge. Joe resets, more annoyed than concerned, and comes forward again. this time with both arms wide, meaning to simply engulf the smaller man and end the whole business through sheer enclosing mass. The strategy that has worked in every bar and parking lot for 9 straight years. Bruce's hands rise in a small, almost gentle motion, meeting Joe's forearms not with force against force, but with redirection, guiding 400 pounds of forward momentum 2 full feet past its intended target. Joe stumbles into the space where Bruce used to be standing, catching himself against nothing. And for the first time that afternoon, the gym goes quiet. Not silent, quiet. The specific quiet of 40 people recalculating something in real time that their eyes had already told them was impossible. A murmur runs through the 40 onlookers, low and uncertain, the specific sound of a crowd that came expecting one kind of story and is now watching a different one begin to unfold in front of them. Joe turns, breathing harder now, his face reddening past simple exertion into something closer to disbelief. He tries a third approach, a heavy overhand strike aimed to finish this decisively before anyone can question what just happened twice. Bruce steps in, not away, enclosing the distance to precisely the range where Joe's reach becomes a liability instead of a weapon. His right hand rises in a short, straight line and taps Joe's solar plexus. Light, controlled, a demonstration rather than a strike, delivered with perhaps 4 ounces of committed pressure. Joe's breath catches mid-motion. His enormous chest, capable of moving mountains of plate-loaded iron, has no answer for 4 ounces placed exactly where his own nervous system cannot ignore it. He staggers back a step, then a second step, and his front leg buckles, not swept, not tripped, simply unable to hold 405 pounds whose balance point has been quietly and invisibly relocated 3 inches to the left of where his body expected it to be. He goes down onto the rubber flooring with a sound that the entire gym feels through the soles of their shoes before they consciously register hearing it. 405 pounds meeting a mat from a standing height is not a small event, and for a full second afterward, nobody moves at all. Bruce does not follow him down. He does not stand over him. He steps back to a neutral distance, hands returning to his sides, and simply waits, breathing exactly as evenly as he was 90 seconds earlier, before any of this had started. Somewhere near the back of the crowd, a barbell that someone had been mid-lift clatters back onto its rack, forgotten, the sound unnaturally loud in a room that has otherwise gone completely still. Joe lies there for 3 full seconds, blinking up at the corrugated ceiling and the yellow afternoon light coming through the skylights, running a quiet inventory of a body that has never once failed him and has just failed him completely. In front of 40 people who will tell this story for years, he sits up slowly, testing his own weight against the floor the way a man tests ice. Nothing is broken. Nothing even particularly hurts, beyond a ringing, ego-deep surprise of it. Bruce extends a hand. Joe looks at it for a long moment, the way a man looks at something he doesn't yet understand, then takes it. Bruce pulls him upright, with more apparent ease than 405 pounds should allow, using Joe's own recovering momentum rather than raw strength to help him find his feet again. "You've got real power," Bruce says, and means it. "I felt it in that first punch. It just never found anything to land on." Joe, still catching his breath, manages only, "Nobody's put me on the ground. Not once. Not in 9 years of training." "This wasn't about who's stronger," Bruce says. "You're stronger than I am, by a wide margin, and that's not something either of us needs to argue about. This was only ever about where that strength goes once you commit to throwing it." They end up sitting on the low wooden bench at the edge of the mat, Joe still working through the shock of it, sweat cooling on both of them, while the gym slowly resumes its ordinary rhythm of clanging plates around them, though every set of eyes in the building keeps drifting back toward the two of them anyway. "I don't understand it," Joe says finally, turning his own hands over as if they might explain something. "I bench 620. I could probably move a parked car if I really had to. How does 135 pounds just not be there when it matters?" Bruce considers the question with the same care he seems to bring to everything. "Your body generates enormous force," he says. "Nobody in this room would argue otherwise, and I wouldn't either. But force by itself is only potential. It has to travel through a target that's actually still there by the time it arrives. I wasn't fighting your strength tonight, Joe. I was reading where it was going before it got there, and making sure it arrived somewhere empty. Joe frowns, working through it slowly, the way a man works through something that contradicts 9 years of settled belief. So none of this, the size, the strength, none of it matters? It matters enormously, Bruce says. If I'd let you get both arms fully around me the way you wanted to the second time, this ends in about 1 second, and not in my favor. Size is completely real. It only wins if it can find its target. That's the whole art of it, really. Not being where the force expects you to be, and knowing exactly where to place a small amount of your own force so that it counts for more than a much larger amount of someone else's. Is that some kind of secret kung fu trick? Joe asks, some of his old bravado creeping back in now, softened by genuine curiosity. Bruce almost smiles at that. It isn't a secret at all. It's just work, and a different kind of work than yours. You've spent 9 years teaching your body to move iron efficiently. I've spent 20 years teaching mine to read a moving target and be somewhere else by the time it arrives. Different training aimed at a different problem. Neither one makes the other worthless. They're just not the same tool. Joe turns that over for a moment, then asks the question underneath the question he'd actually meant to ask. Could you have hurt me? Back there, when you tapped my chest. Could you have really put me down for good if you'd wanted to? Bruce considers this honestly, the way he considers most things people ask him in earnest. Yes, he says simply, but hurting you was never the goal tonight. Showing you something true was. Joe sits with that for a while, looking down at his own hands. Hands that have moved more iron over 9 years than most men will touch in a lifetime. Hands that a few minutes ago could not find a 135-pound man standing 3 feet in front of him. I walked in here this afternoon thinking I already knew everything worth knowing about being strong. He says finally, quiet enough that only Bruce and the 2 men closest to the bench can hear it clearly. I think I might have been wrong about that. Bruce shakes his head slightly. You weren't wrong about being strong. You were only wrong about what strength is actually for. Hal Grierson, still holding his stopwatch, wanders over and sits down heavily on the other side of the bench, looking between the two of them like a man trying to referee a conversation instead of a fight. 22 years I've run this gym, he says. Watched a lot of big men come through that door thinking bigger always wins. Never seen anybody take Joe off his feet like that. Not once. Bruce nods politely, but doesn't take the comment as an invitation to elaborate further. He has said what needed saying to the man it needed saying to, and the rest of the gym can draw its own conclusions or not, as it pleases. Joe, for his part, looks at Hal and manages something close to a laugh, the first easy sound he's made since the whole thing started. Neither had I, Hal. Neither had I. Joe Marsh did not stop lifting. He kept his 620-pound bench, kept the gold-lettered plaque bolted next to the squat rack, kept most of the 405 pounds that had made him a small legend at Ironclad Barbell Club for the better part of a decade. But something in how he carried that mass changed, starting that same afternoon. Before Bruce left the gym to make his 6 o'clock class, Joe asked, quietly, without any of the swagger that had opened the whole encounter, whether he could come by sometime and learn, not to trade barbells for kung fu. Exactly. But to understand the part of fighting that had nothing at all to do with how much a man could lift. Bruce wrote down the address of a small second-floor school in Chinatown on the back of a gym receipt and told him Tuesdays and Thursdays were open to serious students, regardless of what the scale said. Joe showed up that following Tuesday evening and kept showing up for close to 2 years, training footwork and timing and the reading of an opponent's weight in the mornings before hitting the squat rack in the same buildings, parking lot most afternoons, slowly discovering that the two disciplines weren't opposites at all, but companions that had simply never been introduced to each other. He never became fast in the way Bruce was fast, and he never expected to. That wasn't the point, and by the second month of training he understood that clearly. What changed was smaller and more permanent, the reflexive certainty that size alone settles an argument, worn down session by session into something closer to respect for a kind of strength his own training had never touched. He told the story of that July afternoon for the rest of his life, usually the same way, usually to some new, overconfident lifter who'd wandered into whatever gym Joe happened to be training at that decade. "I thought the biggest man in the room automatically wins," he'd say. "Took 135 pounds to teach me the room. Doesn't care how big you are. It only cares whether your strength can actually find where the fight is." 40 people watched Joe Marsh go down on that rubber mat in the summer of 1970. And for years afterward, whenever some new arrival at Ironclad started talking too loudly about how size decides every argument before it starts, one of the old-timers by the squat rack would nod toward the back wall, toward the exact stretch of flooring where it happened, and say, without much drama in it at all, "Not always. Go ask Joe." Bruce, for his part, rarely spoke of the afternoon at all, not because it embarrassed him. Nothing about it did, but because to him it had never been the point of the story in the first place. When students at the Chinatown school occasionally heard a second-hand version of it and asked whether it was true, whether he had really dropped a 400-pound man in front of 40 witnesses, he tended to answer the question with a question of his own. Not whether it happened, but why they assumed the outcome would have been any different. "Size is a fact," he told one skeptical new student, a broad-shouldered dock worker who had wandered and convinced that hands that big made technique unnecessary. "It is never the whole fact. Train your body to be big if that serves you. But train your mind to notice where the fight actually is, or the size will only ever be potential, sitting there, waiting for a target that never quite arrives." The dock worker, like Joe Marsh before him, kept coming back on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and in time understood exactly what Bruce had meant, the same slow, humbling way that Joe had understood it, on a rubber mat, in front of 40 people, in a converted machine shop 2 blocks from the Pacific Coast Highway, on an ordinary Tuesday in the summer of 1970.